North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. I'm John David Wells. And strangely, I'm not dead. More about that in a moment. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly, fairly. We analyze the news from fact and bias. We point out both. There is commentary. That's just my opinion. That's not the news. Not in any way, shape, or form. It's just what I think. And it's just as valuable. That opinion is just as valuable as yours. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. And we are live right now on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Twitch. This show will be available later on today on Patreon and Rumble. The November jobs report is out. U.S. employers added 263,000 jobs in November as hiring remains sturdy despite rising interest rates, high inflation, and mounting recession worries. The unemployment rate held steady at 3.7%, according to the Labor Department. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg estimated 200,000 jobs were added last month. Payroll gains were revised down by 46,000 to 269,000 for September, but up by 23,000 to 284,000 for October, lowering advances for the first 2 months by a trivial 23,000 and leaving intact the portrait of a gradually slowing but remarkably resilient job market. The report likely will not be welcomed. The report will likely not be welcomed by a Federal Reserve looking for the supply of available workers to increase and job and wage growth to throttle back to cool inflation that at 7.7% is just modestly below a 40-year high. That could mean continued aggressive interest rate hikes aimed at tempering prices increasing, and a development that would likely batter the stock market that has rallied on hopes of slowing interest rates. Ironically, by pushing the Fed to raise rates further, continued strong job growth makes a near-term recession more likely, says Gus Fauché. He's the chief economist of PNC Financial Services Group. Capital Economics and Nationwide, among other research firms, still expect the Fed to dial back by a half-point rate increase this month after 4 straight 0.75-point bumps earlier this year. Now, this is interesting. The unemployment rate stayed flat at 3.7%. However, in November, the share of adults working or looking for jobs edged down to 62.1%, leaving it well below the pre-pandemic level of 63.4%. The labor force participation rate generally had been rising since 2020 as workers returned to a hot labor market after caring for children or staying idle because of COVID-19 fears. But that share has roughly held steady this year, underscoring that most Americans intent on returning to the workforce have already done so, especially baby boomers who retired early in the pandemic. That could keep pay increases elevated as employers compete for a more limited pool of workers, forcing companies to raise prices further to maintain profits. Yep. Now, that's something that doesn't have anything to do with politics, by the way. That's just human demographics. But what it does is this. People leaving the labor participation rate will artificially keep the unemployment rate low because those people are no longer a part of the mathematical puzzle where unemployment rate is calculated. They just don't count. And so that's interesting. Once again, I'm not ascribing any kind of political anything to that. What I'm just trying to tell you is what's going on. Now, once again, didn't someone predict we would avoid a recession due to a strong job market this summer? Yes, Langston, you did. I was right again. No 10% inflation and jobs available everywhere. Okay, yeah. But hang on a second. All right. First of all, the recession isn't this year. I've told you over and over and over again that when you make financial moves in this country, it takes about a year and a half to turn this aircraft carrier around. By the way, most Wall Street analysts agree with me that there will be a recession next year. And the only thing that's going to keep this from being a tough recession is fancy banking by the Fed. Okay. That may indeed work. Those guys are really good. There are a lot of people that are concerned, Elon Musk chiefly among them, that thinks another three-quarter percentage point, another 75 basis points, might propel a deeper recession next year. But that could happen. The point of the matter is this. Frankly, Langston, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I predicted 10% inflation, but remember what I'm telling you about this labor participation rate. There are fewer workers. How do you get somebody to come and work for you? Well, you offer them more money. How is inflation created? When there's more money available to the market expands to soak it up. Suddenly, people that got their raise don't have any more real buying power because the rest of the market expanded to cover their raise. Like, for example, right now, salaries are up incrementally to somewhere, it's in the fives, in the 5%, like 5.5%. Let's just say that. That's close. All right. But inflation is still 7.7%. So what we have here is we have a situation where even though you got a raise, it wasn't enough to cover prices already increasing. Okay, so I know there's a lot to this. This is an arcane puzzle, and I play with it, just trying to understand a little bit more about it nearly every day. But once again, you have to understand that just because, say, for example, the Fed is toying with an interest rate, the synergistic effects through the economy are amazing. Believe me, the 2008 recession, that could have been a disaster. That could have just been a disaster. The uh, the uh, the things that were turned down by RNB Paribas back in the day, those derivatives using subprime mortgage lending, that could have been a disaster. And the Fed fixed it. I was on the air when it happened. I got to know Richard Fisher, who was the chairman of the Dallas Fed. He's amazing. And so they may be able to do this. And I certainly hope that it's going to work. Hang on just a second here. I just discovered something else. Hold on a minute. Let me do this real fast. I just discovered that my my ticker is on the wrong date again. So I have to figure this out. I have to fix this real fast. All right. And I will because I can. Because I can. See? Just like that. And then I do this. And then I do that. And then I hit save. And then I go show. Okay. So that labor participation rate is a big deal. And that's because lots of people just retired during the COVID mess. And so there you have it. All right. Let's see what else is going on. Last month, hourly wages rose 18 cents to 32.82, pushing the annual increase to 5.1% from 4.7%. Okay, I said 5.5. It's actually 5.1%. Okay. But like I said, inflation is 7.7%. People are still losing money. Stocks opened lower following the release of the report. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down by 0.09. Let's see where it is right now. CNBC.com. The only functioning part of NBC journalism anymore. The Dow Jones is up 42 points. S&P down 2.5. NASDAQ down 15.5. And there you go. Those are the major indexes. So the Dow Jones is in plus territory. You know what that means? That means they can't figure out what's going on either. Right? That's what that means. In other words, all these money guys, that work as hard as they possibly can to make sure that they're getting the best possible return on their money, they don't know what's happening. And what we're seeing out of this economy and this market is fascinating. Believe me, economists are going to be studying what has been going on in this nation. With well over $32 trillion of national debt, but easily the most productive workforce in the history of the human endeavor. I mean, people are going to be talking about this for decades. How is it that we have this economy? How is it? Inflation's easy to explain. It truly is. right? You put upward pressure on a basic commodity like gasoline, and then what you do is you flood the market with money that nobody earned. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not carping about the $1.9 trillion infrastructure bill. That's not what I'm carping about. I'm just pointing out that that money hit the marketplace, and the marketplace expanded to grab it. And so there you go. By the way, Anhoy Guzman also points out 44,000 people have been laid off in the month of November. Now, some of that is seasonal, but some of it isn't. And that's what I keep watching. I keep watching the first crack in the dam. I keep watching for that. And I think it's one of those things that, says, something might happen, but I'm not going to speculate. Langston says it best. It's only going to get better. I hope so. I hope so. Now, please understand the history is not on the side of this working, but what the heck? What the heck? So there you go. Let's see. I wonder if the Dow Jones could hover around 30K. We won't be too bad off. Well, it's only if you're somebody that owns stocks. If you own stocks, then yeah, that money's probably in pretty safe hands. By the way, the stocks opened lower following the report, et cetera, as I was talking about. Yields on 10-year U.S. Treasury notes rose to 3.57% on Friday. Leisure and hospitality, the industry hit hardest by the pandemic, led the job gains with 88,000, mostly in restaurants and bars. Employment in the sector is still nearly 1 million below its pre-COVID level, though U.S. payrolls overall recovered all 22 million jobs lost in the crisis in August. All right, so it's not that President Biden's policies have created all these jobs. It's that all these jobs return to the American economy. And you can translate that any way you want to. If you're a Biden fan, they're going to say, "Yep, he absolutely made it happen." Well, I don't know. Retailers shed 30,000 jobs after seasonal adjustments because the industry added far fewer holiday workers than historically traditional. Despite the resilience, the labor market has gradually cooled down this year. Job growth is moderated from a pace of about 450,000 for most of 2022 to 300,000 in recent months, lower than that this month. High inflation, the Fed's sharp rate hikes have hobbled rate-sensitive sectors like housing and technology. Okay? Tech giants Meta, Twitter, Amazon, DoorDash, and Lyft, among many others, have announced a total of more than 142,000 layoffs. 142,000 layoffs. So we'll see. By the way, still a labor market that was blistering earlier this year is losing steam. Most economists are forecasting a recession next year. Are you listening, Langston? They're forecasting a recession next year as the Fed continues to hike rates, leading some companies to leave positions vacant when employees leave and freeze hiring. 10.3 million job openings in October, down from 10.7 the previous month. So once again, available jobs dropping, along with the actual available workforce and layoffs. What does this mean? We're all going to find out. If I can figure out something brilliant, I'll let you know. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172 on Flannel Shirt Friday. Earlier throughout the summer, I was doing Fishing Shirt Friday because it was hot as blazes around here. Now, not so much. And I didn't have a fishing shirt on for the last couple of weeks, couple of Fridays, because it was too cold. And so somebody said, well, why don't you morph it from Fishing Shirt Friday to Flannel Shirt Friday? And so here I am in my flannel shirt. What do you think? Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. By the way, Brian Galbraith, I think I said your name properly, Brian, is concerned about a deeper recession and hyperinflation. That's possible. I mean, the deeper recession. If the Fed, remember what I told you about the economy, running the economy is like a bullwhip. You know, your hand doesn't move. What causes the crack of a bullwhip is the end of the actual leather breaking the sound barrier. And that's because it's moving really fast, but your wrist doesn't move that fast. Just does this, right? But it propagates. So when you're in a situation where you're working with the economy, this little flick of the wrist, like these incremental interest rates, can turn into something very, very bad down the road if you misjudge. Now, of course, you know, what you can always do is if you do indeed misjudge, etc., then what you can do is then you can cut interest rates, and that'll bring things back relatively quickly. But the problem with all that is that then you start getting these oscillations, right? Hyperinflation is not likely insofar as all of the hyperinflation that we deal with has to deal with economies outside the international monetary system. And they really don't have the same safeguards in place. You know, if you really want an eye-opening conversation, go back through the gold panics, do a search on gold panics in the 19th century. Every 2 or 3 years, there was a gold panic. And the reason was because people were manipulating the price of gold because that's what the currency was based on. And so when we stopped doing all of that, then all of that just disappeared. So the question is, that didn't happen. 1974 is when we went off the gold standard. So 1974, we go off the gold standard, and suddenly the cash, the American dollar, is balanced for value against all the other world currencies. And so those world currencies very likely will not allow hyperinflation. And once again, that's why central banks are in power. That's why they are there, to be able to stop that kind of stuff. By the way, the President of the United States signed a national freight rail strike bill today. President Biden warned that it would cripple the economy and put millions of Americans out of work heading into the holidays if the rail workers went on strike. We've spared the country that catastrophe, said President Biden. I know it was a tough vote for members of both parties. It was tough for me, but it was the right thing to do at the moment. At President Biden's urging, Congress voted earlier this week to intervene in a labor dispute between rail unions and operators of the nation's freight railways. Lawmakers voted to adopt a tentative agreement the White House brokered in September, and that was with union leaders and rail operators, except some rank-and-file workers were not happy with it, and out of the 12 unions representing the rail workers in the deal, there were about 6 of them that didn't agree. And so back to the drawing board, and this bill will stop it from happening. All right, so there you go. That's the very latest when it comes to the economy. Coming up in just a couple of seconds, I know I'm a bore when it comes to Alex Jones, but Alex Jones is in the news again. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that as we continue with the Wells Report. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We'll be back with more in just a moment for this Flannel Shirt Friday. Thanks for being here today. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today as we get through this Friday, the weekend right around the corner. I hope you have a restful one planned. So far, people are looking at my flannel shirt and saying that Larry the Cable Guy really likes it. Thank you. That's very nice. Let's see. Timing all off on buying a new truck. Yeah. In July, the interest rates for a truck were somewhere around 2.3%. Now it's about 8.1. Yeah. Yep. Let's see. Mike also points out that there are no sick days added to the railroad contract. This is, by the way, kind of an example of federal union busting. And yeah, Eddie Jones points out that government interference in unions has a famous backstory, one under concrete, maybe. Yeah. Gary also points out that there may be a new strain of viruses coming. It'll be called the choo-choo flu, mainly because people start calling in sick. That's the point. That's the point. They can't call in sick. If they call in sick, they will get fired. I could not imagine trying to buy a house these days. Lots of school districts around here passed bond elections, so I imagine they're paying for higher rates. Yep, indeed. Let's see. Got a Facebook sticker on a post from November 18th today. How weird. So anyway, I was not here yesterday. Yesterday, I was miserable. I was miserable. I don't have time to talk much about. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. I was miserable. And the reason I was miserable is because I got this virus. And it was, I mean, I was run down. I felt horrible. I was as tired as I could possibly be. I had a headache. I was coughing. Does this sound familiar to you? I had a headache. I was coughing, and my nose was running, and so on and so forth. No fever at all. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I took a COVID test. No COVID. Okay. But I was miserable. So I stayed in bed yesterday all day until I had to play a drum gig last night at the Dream Tacos. And I played well, but let me tell you something. That was a struggle because I really felt awful. I mean, the last time I got the flu, I pulled a few of these shows because I had to, because the guy who was filling in for me was a guy named Chris Kroc, and Chris is a disaster. And I just didn't want him on the show. And so I went ahead and worked through it. Yes, Anhoy Guzman points out it's probably mountain cedar. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Something like that. But anyway, I was junk last night. And I'm really sorry I missed the show. And you're saying, well, now, wait a minute. You didn't go to work, but you played last night. Yeah, well, the problem with it is it was too short notice for them to get another drummer. And so that's why I went ahead and played the gig. And I did okay. There were times, though. You know, Benadryl and drumming just doesn't go together well. It just doesn't. And when you're drumming, every now and then you'll just forget what you're doing. So a couple of times that happened. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. I mean, it wasn't just me, but the band sounded good. We had a great crowd at the Dream Tacos, and we'll let you know when we're going to be playing again. As I said before the break, I know I'm a bore when it comes to Alex Jones. Alex Jones is one of those guys who flouts convention. And there have been others. There have been others that flout convention, especially when it comes to broadcasting. Because guys that will, say, for example, violate FCC law, right, or just barely skirt it, or make themselves famous for violating FCC law, or getting very close to it, like Howard Stern, really used to annoy me. Because in that particular age of radio, the kids listening to their favorite songs would be radio listeners for the rest of their lives. Well, what happened was, thanks to the crazy morning hijinks of people like Howard Stern, and then what came after that was shock radio and all that stuff, which is what Alex Jones is a part of. What ended up happening is the radio, for all intents and purposes, killed itself. We gave away an entire generation of new listeners because what had happened is that we decided that the road to riches in radio was paved with somebody else's music. Well, then the iPod came out, and why would the kids have any reason to listen to a radio station when they could get their favorite songs on their iPod anytime they wanted to, blah, blah, blah. So what ended up happening is that people like me suddenly became sort of in vogue again because talk show hosts don't need records. And Alex Jones was one of the guys from Shock Radio that made a whole lot of money. And while he was doing it, was scaring the snot out of anybody who listened to him. Conspiracy theorist par beyond all measure. Well, today he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Texas in Houston. In the filing, Jones said he owes 50 to 99 creditors. He said he has assets between $1 and $10 million. His estimated liabilities are between $1 billion and $10 billion. Wow. A Connecticut jury in October ordered Jones to pay $965 million to compensate 15 plaintiffs who suffered from his spreading of conspiracy theories that the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a hoax. 20 first graders and 6 educators were killed in that shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. In December of 2012, last month, a judge awarded the families an additional $473 million in punitive damages. Jones' filing comes a day after the rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, made several anti-Semitic comments during an interview on Infowars, the Alex Jones Show. Jones and his Infowars media site portrayed the mass shooting as staged as a part of a government conspiracy to crack down on gun possession. Several families sued Jones, saying that he had defamed them, that his lies led to threats and harassment from Jones' followers. One parent testified that conspiracy theorists urinated on his 7-year-old's grave and threatened to dig up the coffin. Later, Jones said in a video on the site the Sandy Hook lawsuits were part of a campaign by the left in this country to weaponize the legal system. Another conspiracy theory, I guess, huh? In addition to the Connecticut court action, a Texas jury earlier this year awarded the parents of a child killed in the shooting $49 million in damages. During that trial, an economist hired by the plaintiffs testified that Jones and Free Speech Systems, the parent company of Infowars, were worth up to $270 million. The record showed that Jones withdrew $62 million for himself in 2021. So what is this actually going to work out to? Well, for now, court action has come to a halt in the Connecticut case. A judge canceled a hearing scheduled for today on the Sandy Hook family's request to get payment for damages from Jones' assets. But Chris Mattei, an attorney for the Sandy Hook family in the Connecticut case, doesn't think Jones' bankruptcy filing will work. The bankruptcy system does not protect anyone who engages in intentional and egregious attacks on others, as Mr. Jones did. The American judicial system will hold Alex Jones accountable, and we will never stop working to enforce the jury's verdict. Later this year, Jones is expected to face another trial in a case filed by Sandy Hook parents. That filing lists families of Sandy Hook victims as creditors, including, this is the bankruptcy filing. That filing lists families of Sandy Hook victims as creditors, including Robert Parker, whose daughter Emily died in the massacre, and who is owed $120 million according to the filing. Also owed $90 million is William Aldenberg, the FBI agent who responded to the shooting and was accused by Jones of being a crisis actor. So what I have noticed in the media is this overwrought need to pursue sensationalism. What happens is that when you do this job, if you have any kind of credibility at all, and you can pretty much say anything on the radio and somebody will think you're credible. You can say things that will badly damage a lot of people without you trying to. Now, some of that is just snowflakes, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I get it. But on the other hand, there are Sandy Hook families. One of the reasons why I do the news is because I'm not interested in making things up. There are enough people in the news industry making things up. I'm not going to be another one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to report the news as it lays on the table, just as you hear me do it. By the way, the Alex Jones story was from USA Today. And then I make comment on it. When you have an opportunity to talk to a lot of people all at once, there's a responsibility that goes with that. There is a fiduciary duty for you to be a good citizen. There are all kinds of psychological things in my age of radio. They taught us all these things. Psychographics, demographics. They taught us statistics. They taught us everything. And what ends up happening is that someone will say something or someone will do something or what have you that will elicit a base response from someone, like a jolt of adrenaline, for example. Well, your body really likes that. And it makes you want to go back and get another one. The problem with all that is that as you keep doing that, those jolts come harder and harder to find. They become harder to find. And so what ends up happening, as Alex Jones found out, you continually have to escalate your rhetoric until there's no more escalation, where drama becomes melodrama and people start to laugh. Except nobody was laughing when it came to Alex Jones. Now, normally, this would not get to this level. But this is something else about radio. We used to work for radio companies. Now we're working for ourselves. I've told you this radio broadcast is completely independent. I'm not a part of any radio company. Not at all. And so what I do is I do this job and so on. So if I make a mistake, if I say something that's inappropriate or not that I have to worry about FCC regulations because this isn't over-the-air broadcasting at this point. But if I'm in a position where I hurt someone, they don't go to some big radio corporation with staff lawyers from here to high heaven. They come to me. But fortunately, I really don't have much to worry about because I simply tell the truth and I can prove what I'm saying. Now, some of it's opinion, true. Some of it is. But I can trace back to everything that I've reported for the last 20 years and get those articles back and use them for research and I do that from time to time. Gary says everybody's going to podcasts and streaming. Yeah, that's true. Radio is killing itself or has killed itself. It just depends on, whether or not you're one of the lucky few to be involved in it. If that's luck. I'm not exactly sure it is. But all I can say is that Alex Jones, and this is going to be a teaching moment for anybody that wants to continue doing this work or wants to get involved in this work. The most important thing you can do is to faithfully, fairly, with love in your heart even, be a fiduciary to people's sensibilities. Take care of the people that listen to you. Be gentle with them. Tell them what they need to know. But don't scare them to death over and over and over. And there's something else I do that Alex Jones doesn't. I don't say things that aren't true or that I can't prove are true. I just don't do it. My opinion is something else, but when I'm talking about news, I've got 2 articles for every one that you hear for that exact reason. I just got a note. The CDC is saying that flu is up in my area. I've already got a flu shot. I know what you just said. Oh, so you got a flu shot. So you got the flu. Ha! No, I don't. Let's see. That's a daily thing now. Yeah. No, I already got my flu shot. I hope you got your flu shot. I don't know what this is, but you don't want it. I mean, I wore a mask playing the drums last night. That was fun. So anyway, thanks very much for being with us here on the Wells Report. We're going to be back in just a couple of seconds. What have I got coming up for you? Oh, TGI Fridays escaped getting sued themselves. And it was fakery involved with them too. See how things tie together? It's like carefully choreographed ballet, right? This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. You stay right there, please. It's Flannel Shirt Friday. I'm John David Wells. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for having us on. I sincerely appreciate it. Remember the part that I was telling you this was an independent broadcast? If you'd like to support it, you can. Please, by all means, subscribe to this show on the platform you're watching it on. Just subscribe. That really goes a very long way. Give us a thumbs up or a like or a heart or whatever. Anything positive is wonderful. If you would like to pass this along to your friends, I sure would appreciate it. Get feedback. Get feedback from your friends. What do they think of the show? How can I improve it? Tell me. And if you'd like to do some financial help for the show, that's easy too. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon.com/The Wells Report. patreon.com/The Wells Report. $1 or $2 a month. That's all you got to do. Be awesome. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. By the way, we have new pledgers. We have new patrons on Patreon, and it's awfully great to have those guys with us. Thank you. All right. So this is something else. Lawsuits abundant for fakery. However, all is not lost. A judge decided to let TGI Fridays off the hook in a class action lawsuit, claiming that TGI Fridays branded mozzarella sticks are misleading because it contains no mozzarella cheese. Excuse me? Yeah. There is no mozzarella cheese in the TGI Fridays branded mozzarella sticks. I know. You're sitting there saying to yourself, dear heavens to Betsy, what am I eating? It's not as bad as you think. Okay? It's not as bad as you think. The lawsuit, however, can proceed against the food's manufacturer. The lawsuit was filed in federal court in 2021 by Amy Joseph against TGI Fridays and the snack maker Inventure Foods over the snack product TGI Fridays mozzarella stick snacks. That was hard to say, and I got right through it. Yay. That's the joys of Benadryl. Slows your mind down just enough. Anyway, Joseph claims the product is misbranded and misleads consumers into believing it contains mozzarella cheese when in fact it only contains, wait for it, cheddar cheese. Whoa. Cheddar cheese. Mike says, I don't eat mozzarella sticks anyway. I've been known to wolf a few mozzarella sticks down in my time. I don't do it anymore, but I have. Federal Judge Robert Dow denied motions from both defendants to dismiss the case earlier this week, but granted TGI Friday's motion to be removed as a defendant in the case because he found the restaurant chain's only role in the product was as a licensor. Oh, okay. While plaintiff makes wide-ranging allegations in her complaint about TGIF's role in the creation of the product's packaging, and the complaint show that TGI Fridays is only the licensor of the mark, wrote Dow in a memorandum issued Monday. Dow argued that a company licensing its trademark to appear on a product is not enough to make it liable for any misleading advertising. Joseph is an Illinois resident. She said she purchased a six-pack of the product on Amazon last year, mistakenly believed the sticks would contain mozzarella because the listing didn't provide a description of the ingredients. The product is labeled mozzarella sticks snacks. Sticks snacks? Sticks snacks? That's hard to say. And features an image of what appear to be mozzarella sticks. The back label specifies the sticks only contain no mozzarella, but Joseph said she would have reasonably believed the product contained mozzarella given the prominence of the words mozzarella sticks. I can see how she would feel that way. Her reasonable understanding that mozzarella sticks by definition contain mozzarella cheese. Attorneys for Inventure Foods have alleged in court that Joseph is a serial class action plaintiff who has filed numerous suits in Illinois over the past decade and argued that Joseph cherry-picked only one part of the product's labeling. The main part. I don't think that's a really good argument there, counselor. I could be wrong. We are pleased with the judge's ruling. The judge agreed with us that claims in the lawsuit have merit, but the case should not be dismissed, said Joseph's lawyer, Thomas Zimmerman. We intend to proceed against Inventure Foods on behalf of the nationwide class of purchasers of TGI Fridays mozzarella sticks. An inquiry sent to Inventure Foods was not immediately returned. Okay? And so, what's going on with that? I wonder what else. Did you know that, let's see, the Filet-O-Fish sandwich was actually made out of some other kind of fish. It wasn't actually fish. It was a mollusk. It was something, so I stopped eating those too. Oh boy. It was awful. Let's see, I think TGI Fridays closed by me in Lake Worth on Jacksboro Highway. Yeah, there was one in McKinney, but it got bulldozed for a Denny's. Not that I would eat anyway. Yeah. Whatever was in the cheese was tasty. Applebee's cheese sticks are also. Yeah. So ridiculous to gripe about cheese sticks. Opportunistic. Throw the case out. Well, I don't know. I don't know. You know how I feel about truth. Why don't you just call them cheese sticks? Melty cheese sticks. Or better yet, why don't you just put mozzarella cheese in them? How tough can this be? Mozzarella is not any more difficult to make than cheddar. They just make more cheddar and the prices are lower. I get it. But for crying out loud, just put mozzarella cheese in it. Stop it. Stop it. This is the Wells Report. We're at the end of hour number 1. Stick around. Coming up in hour number 2. How about a real life Terminator? More in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. And okay. And so here we are. And I sincerely appreciate your help. And I will be back coming up in just a moment. Oh, dear. All right. Actually, I'm going to stick around here for a while because I missed my cue. I'm going to do this anyway. I'll see you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news truthfully, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's my opinion. It's not the news. And we debate because my opinion is just as valuable as yours, so share it if you would. I would appreciate it immensely. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. We were talking about fake mozzarella sticks last hour along with a whole bunch of other things. And here's Ann Hoy Guzman saying, read the ingredients before you buy. No wonder we have less caution labels than in the old days. Oh, no wonder we had less caution labels in the old days. True. Okay, but the only thing I can tell you is this. You know, there you go again, Ann, expecting people to read the directions. I mean, come on. Just saying. By the way, we also spent some quality time discussing the rail strike and the economy. It was a good conversation. So if you missed it, make sure you go back and get it. If you're watching on Rumble or Patreon, this show was recorded between 2 and 5 p.m. Central Time. So this is essentially pre-recorded for you. If you want to send me something, if you want to ask a question, if you want to give me an opinion, if you want to take part in the debate, send me an email, thewellsreport@frontier.com. thewellsreport@frontier.com. I will look for it, and I will make sure that I read it on the air. By the way, make sure that you, in the subject line, make sure you put the platform on which you were speaking or the platform that you were watching when you had your question or wanted to make a comment. That way I know it's you. In 2016, there was an amazing, horrifying event in Dallas, Texas. There was a guy who, from a lofty perch, started picking off police officers. And what ended up happening is that he was successful in holding them off for 2 hours. After the 45-minute gun battle. The Dallas police chief at the time was David Brown. Now he's the police chief in Chicago. Out of the frying pan and into the fire, huh? Yeah. What happened is that he gave an order to his SWAT team to come up with a creative plan to neutralize the subject without putting other officers in the line of fire. In the time it took Chief Brown to get back from updating the public about the ongoing battle, his officers came up with a plan. Now, remember, this was in 2016. Just throwing that out there because, you know, when I say I have research from way back when, I do. Anyway, that being said, it would keep the police officers, this plan would keep the police officers out of the line of fire and take out the suspect. They improvised the whole idea in about 15 or 20 minutes. By the time the chief gave the plan of the go-ahead, at least 2 officers had already been killed, several more gravely wounded. 3 more would later die from their injuries. The sniper was targeting police officers, particularly white police officers. Quote, he was basically lying to us, laughing at us, singing and asking how many did he get, and saying he wanted to kill more, said Chief Brown. Chief Brown made the final call, carried out the plan. Law enforcement experts said they've never seen done by local officials. They sent a police robot to find the shooter, and they put a pound of C4 plastic explosive on the robot. Chief Brown said the robot was used in the building where Johnson was still sniping, intent on continuing to kill. They'd had the robot for a long while. It was a Remote Tech Androx Mark V, that's Mark 5, A1, manufactured by Northrop Grumman. Was purchased by the department in 2008. The robot cost $151,000. It sustained minor damage to the extension arm and is still functional. Chief Brown says his officers were up against a military-trained suspect holed up on the second floor of the El Centro Community College building in downtown Dallas. The robot was maneuvered behind a brick wall with the suspect on the other side. The robot was carrying a 1-pound payload ready to be detonated. A pound of C4 runs about $20 if bought in bulk, explosive expert Matt Barnett of Bonetti Explosives told CNN. Barnett is not in law enforcement, but he's licensed to dispose of unexploded ordnance and had been working with explosive material since he was a child out in West Texas. Didn't we all? He agreed to demonstrate what a pound of C4 could do when it's detonated against a wall. The C4 would likely be placed as close to the wall by the robot as possible, then quietly moved behind the wall so the sniper wouldn't notice. If the police could do that, they could likely take out their attacker. A pound of C4 is a lot. I was actually exposed to C4 when I was in high school. I was in ROTC. And you know that training where you crawl under fences and you're crawling around in mud? It's called an infiltration course. I was doing that at Camp Pendleton during one of our cool little jaunts that we did as ROTC cadets. And I went past one of these simulated bunkers, and they touched off a 1/4 pound of C4, and it rattled my teeth. A pound is 4 times more, shall we say, boomy than that. Okay? It's amazing stuff. There are 2 things that'll kill you with explosives. You have overpressure and fragmentation. Fragmentation is the one that we worry about the most. It's usually the number one killer with explosives. The fragments become little missiles. They go through the human body like butter. Overpressure would burst blood vessels and make a person dazed and confused. That's why they use flashbangs. They may not appear to be injured at first, but inside they are bleeding out. And so what ended up happening was Dallas police were hoping the tactic would work. It did. The chief faced criticism from this reporter, in fact, for using what is seen by some as a war tactic in a civilian setting, but he was unequivocal when asked whether he would make the choice again. This wasn't an ethical dilemma for me. I'd do it again to save our officers. Yeah. Now, fast forward to yesterday. San Francisco police could use robots to deploy lethal force under a policy advanced by city supervisors, politicians, that thrust the city into the forefront of a national debate about the use of weaponized robots in American cities. Then they talk about the Dallas police blow-up of the suspect I just told you about. Supporters of the policy, advanced by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors on an 8-3 vote, would allow police to deploy a robot with deadly force in extraordinary circumstances, such as when a mass shooter or terrorist is threatening the lives of officers or civilians. David Lazar, assistant chief of the San Francisco Police Department, cited as an example the gunman who opened fire from his Las Vegas high-rise hotel room in 2017, killing 60 people in the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history. He's shooting, people are pinned down, the police are pinned down, Chief Lazar told the board during a contentious debate about the policy. We would then think to ourselves, okay, this is a possible option. Is it? Is it a possible option? To become law, the policy must be approved again by the board, which is slated to consider it on December 6th, 4 days from now. Will be signed by Mayor London Breed, a Democrat who has expressed support for the proposal. If the police are called to serve in a situation where someone intends to do harm or is already doing harm to innocent people, and there is technology that can help to end the violence and save lives, we need to allow police to use those tools and save those lives. Paul Shara, the vice president and director of studies for the Center for a New American Security and the author of An Army of None, Autonomous Weapons and the Future of War, said he was not aware of another American city that approved such a policy. He said that using robots to deliver deadly force was the exact opposite of what we should be using robots for. The advantage, said Mr. Shara, is that they can create distance between the police and the potential threat, giving officers more time to make decisions without putting themselves in harm's way. Precisely because an officer is no longer at risk, you don't have to use lethal force. You can use non-lethal options such as tear gas or flashbangs to incapacitate someone. He said the concern was that other cities would follow San Francisco's example, eventually leading to a broader use of deadly robots by American law enforcement. Mr. Shara said it becomes normalized. It becomes a tool that police departments turn to in situations they really don't have to. You know, like tasers. Yeah, tasers. Aaron Peskin is a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. He said the policy was developed in response to a state law enacted last year that required law enforcement agencies across California to seek approval of their local governing bodies to use military-style equipment. Responding to the law, the San Francisco Police Department proposed a policy governing a range of equipment in its possession, including a long-range acoustic device, sometimes referred to as a sound cannon, a Bearcat armored vehicle, and a 40-millimeter launcher that can deploy chemical agents like tear gas. Also on the list, 17 robots, 5 of which are out of commission, according to the police department. The robots were acquired between 2010 and 2017, include heavy-duty models that can climb stairs, robots with tank treads that can defuse bombs, and a small robot that can deliver an instantaneous video and audio feed. The police department said that none of its robots were outfitted with lethal force options, and the department has no plans to outfit robots with any type of firearm. So, robots could potentially be equipped with explosive charges to breach fortified structures containing violent, armed, or dangerous subjects, or used to contact, incapacitate, disorient violent, armed, or dangerous suspects who pose a risk of loss of life to law enforcement or other first responders. Where do you stand on this? Where do you stand on this? Do you believe that police should be able to use a robot to kill a violent suspect? Yes or no? Why? Do you believe that that should be one of the tools that police officers have? Do you believe that police officers would essentially deploy a robot and kill someone without necessarily crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's? Yes or no, and why? This is something that I spend an awful lot of time thinking about, actually worrying about more than anything. And the reason I worry about it is because of the obvious. This is rife for abuse. For example, say, for example, a police officer who is getting tired of dealing with a particular suspect walks up and hides behind the wall and drops a hand grenade over the side and kills the suspect. There is someone responsible for that act, right? Okay, so let's assume that a robot crawls up and blows someone to kingdom come. Somebody clears their throat and says, what was that all about? It was a malfunction, sir. Or ma'am. A malfunction. Yeah. What happened was it was really weird. There was a bump in the parking structure, which is where this guy was, and the grenade fell out of the robot's grasper, and the pin was pulled and it went off. Oh. Should something besides a human being take another human being's life? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Should some kind of a non-human device be able to take out the life of a human being? Should something besides a human being be able to kill a human being? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Gary says, wait, they blew the robot up? Well, no, they didn't blow the robot up. No. Robot's tougher than that, but it did screw up its manipulator arm. Okay, in the Dallas case. Alicia says, weaponized robots. Scary. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Alicia says, weaponized robots? Scary? Yeah, scary. Mike says, it's a tool like anything else. Robots aren't autonomous. They are under police control. So in the scenario where there's a malfunction of the robot, the officer running the robot is responsible for the death of the person? Is that it? You know, you also got to keep something in mind. This sort of goes against the old idea of you're innocent until proven guilty, right? Now, I realize that there are people who lose their lives after standoffs with police all the time. And those are 99.998 righteous shoots. But that's a human being taking out a human being. And by the way, a rifle is most clearly not a robot. It can't move. It has to be carried. These are things that may seem a little bit arcane or maybe even obtuse. But all I can say is, I think that if you're going to take a life, you should, say, for example, be at risk yourself. There was somebody who voted against this policy, right? Robots create a false distance that makes killing the individual easier, said Hillary Ronan, a city supervisor who voted against the policy. We don't want to make it easy. We don't want to create that distance and the removal from the emotional impact of killing, taking an individual's life. I agree. Elizabeth Joe, professor at the University of California Davis School of Law, who focuses on policing and technology, said the police would erode public trust in law enforcement more than 2 years after the murder of George Floyd led to global demonstrations against police brutality and systemic racism. I suppose all of this can be summarized as to whether we want to live in a world where police can kill people remotely with robots. I'm not sure we do. Gary says, well, if people would behave, they wouldn't need robots. Yeah. Define behavior. If you do everything your government says, is that the kind of behavior you're talking about? Using a robot to me is like using a tank. We spend a lot of training our officers and military to protect us, use robots to protect them. The operator, the manufacturer of the robot would be liable. How is a human-controlled robot different from a human-controlled weapon? Well, because the human-controlled robot can malfunction and take somebody out without necessarily the police officer having anything to do with it. Witness the idea of putting a grenade in a manipulator arm, having it hit a bump, or having the suspect shoot at it, for example. So now you're in a situation where, okay, the grenade dropped, it went off, the suspect's dead. I didn't have anything to do with it. See, this takes us down a road I don't think we want to go. I don't. Gary also points out that a drone is a robot. Yeah, there were some maniacs a while back that thought about putting weapons on drones, which of course would make skeet shooting or trap shooting with shotguns perhaps the most popular sport in America. Yeah. Gary says a robot is just an extension of the person lobbing the grenade. Okay, but what if there's a malfunction? So that's on the police officer? You're listening to the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us on this Friday. Flannel Shirt Friday, in fact. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Most of the people responding to my question about using a police robot to take out a gunman is okay. So what we've got here is, say, for example, a police officer's driving a car. And say, for example, he hits somebody and kills them. The officer is responsible. Well, yeah, I understand that, but this is not the same kind of thing. You know, the technology for cars is pretty straightforward. They don't drive themselves, but they get closer to it every year, which is why I'm probably not ever going to have another new car. I've got my 2012 Tahoe. That's good enough for me, because I don't want to have a car arguing with me about what moves I want to make on a road. Like, for example, when I have to change lanes because somebody just stopped dead cold in front of me, and I have to change lanes because I always keep my lane options open. I refuse to drive in the box. I don't want to have to push through a system in my car that actually nudges the steering wheel back the other direction. I don't want to do that. That's, but then again, I'm a trained driver. So, okay, so maybe that's an extreme example. But like I said, cars don't drive themselves. These robots are being run by someone, correct? But that robot has deadly force capability. And so, once again, who's responsible if it malfunctions? Then there's this. The Transportation Security Administration has been quietly testing facial recognition technology for passengers screening at 16 major domestic airports from Washington to Los Angeles, and hope to expand it across the United States as soon as next year. Kiosks with cameras are doing a job that used to be completed by humans, checking the photos on travelers' IDs to make sure they're not imposters. The TSA says facial recognition, which has been banned by cities like San Francisco, helps improve security and possibly also efficiency. But it's also bringing an unproven tech with civil rights ramifications we still don't understand to one of the most stressful parts of travel. This, by the way, is from the Washington Post. Jeffrey Fowler is the writer of this. After hearing concerns from the Washington Post readers who have encountered face scans while they were traveling, I wanted to know how the TSA is using the tech and what our rights are. Everybody wants better safety, but is this safer? And what are the real costs? So I quizzed TSA's Jason Lim, who helps run the program formerly known as the Credential Authentication Technology with Camera, CAT2. I also called Albert Fox Kahn, the founder of Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, or STOP. How cute. And one of the biggest critics of facial recognition. I learned the TSA has put some important constraints on its use of facial recognition, but its current programs are just the beginning. No, you don't have to participate in facial recognition at the airport. Whether you'll feel like you have a real choice is a separate question. So, American airports have been experimented with biometric technology for years following the 9/11 attacks. You may have seen the customs collecting biometric information from passengers entering the U.S. In 2019, I tested some of the ways airlines were using face scans to replace boarding passes for international flights. The TSA facial recognition pilot began at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport amid concerns about COVID transmission through contacts in 2020. Okay, so wait a minute. They're using facial recognition on people to try to control COVID? Is any of this putting any alarm bells in your head or anything yet? The system is for general passenger screening. You step up to the travel document checker kiosk, you stick your ID into the machine, then you look into a camera for up to 5 seconds. The machine compares your live photo to the one it sees on your ID. They call this a one-to-one verification system, comparing one face to one ID. Even though the software is judging if you are an imposter, there's still a human agent there to make the final call. How accurate is it? The TSA says it's been better at verifying IDs than the manual process. This technology is definitely a security enhancement. We are so far very satisfied with the performance of the machine's ability to conduct facial recognition accurately. What about people who don't exactly look like their driver's license photos? My driver's license photo doesn't look much like me at all. I've lost 40 pounds since I took that picture. Changing your hairstyle, what have you. TSA has not released the hard data about how its system falsely identifies people through incorrect positive or negative matches. Some of that might come to light in the next year when TSA has to make its case to the Department of Homeland Security to convert airports all over the United States into facial recognition systems. I'm worried the TSA will give a green light to technology that's more likely to falsely accuse black and brown or non-binary travelers and other groups that have historically faced more facial recognition errors. Research has shown that facial recognition algorithms can be less accurate at identifying people of color. A study published by the Federal National Institute of Science and Technology in 2019 found that Asian and African American people were up to 100 times more likely to be misidentified than white men, depending on the particular algorithm and type of search. So, in other words, the facial recognition computers are also white supremacists? Really? Federal studies confirm racial bias at many facial recognition systems, casting doubt on the expanded use. What about your privacy? When some people hear about governments using facial recognition, they rightly picture the situation in China, where broad use of the technology makes it extremely difficult for citizens to evade surveillance. Does going through an airport security now mean Homeland Security has a face ID that can identify you at a protest? The answer is yes. You see, everybody who travels is going to stand there with their ID in one hand and their face in the other. They're going to put the ID in the kiosk, and they're going to have a copy of your ID and a copy of your current face. So, in other words, what they're doing is registering your face as biometric information. And every time you travel, they'll do it again. And yes, they'll know exactly who you are. If there's any video anywhere, and now video is everywhere because we live in a surveillance society, now they've got, well, your facial recognition. What does this point out to you? Does any of this go together? Like, for example, I don't know, a police robot that, like a bloodhound, gets your scent. In this case, the police robot gets a picture. It sort of walks right up to you and says, oh, look, it's John David Wells. Boom. Now, you can say that that's a conspiracy theory if you want to, or you can say it's paranoia on my part if you want to, but it's going to happen. If we go down this road, that will happen. Very likely, there have been systems like this that have been used to kill people already. Facial recognition has been around for a long, long time. There was a time you had to be a criminal before anybody could make you or compel you to give your fingerprints. Now all you have to do is walk down the street. Just walk down the street. Well, you don't have any kind of expectation of privacy when you walk down the street. No, but I certainly do have an expectation of anonymity when I walk down the street. Well, that goes out the window. So any of this bugging you yet? I really do believe it should be bugging you a lot. The scanning and match is made and immediately overwritten at the travel document checker podium. We keep neither the live photo or the photo of the ID. Sure. Every text you make is sucked up into the federal data hub near you. Every email you send, every phone call, everything. Oh, no. We don't actually keep the phone call. We just keep the metadata. No, you keep the whole phone call. The metadata tells people where to get it. Oh, they don't ever do anything with it, unless, of course, you commit a crime. And then what ends up happening is you show up and this guy's got a file this thick. Well, let's see, John David. Oh, look at that. Oh, yeah. 2.5 years ago, you made this phone call to this person. And here's what you said. That's already happening. And why in heaven's name would a security state like the United States of America have a chance to have a picture of your ID and a picture of your face and not keep those images? I'm sorry, I'm calling BS on that. We neither keep the live photo or the photo of the ID. The TSA, however, did acknowledge there are cases in which it holds on to the data for 24 hours, so its Science and Technology Office can evaluate the system's effectiveness. Sure. In case the server that's sucking up all that information out of the kiosk is a little busy that moment. What's more, TSA already has a plan to expand the scope of how it's using the tech. It's running a pilot of a second system in a few airports where you don't even have to present your physical ID for inspection. Your face is your ID. In tests with Delta, machines compare passengers' live faces. Listen to this. Okay, well, what was I just saying? They're going to keep the pictures. In tests with Delta, machines compare passengers' live faces to a database of photos the government already has, typically from passports. For now, this system only works for passengers with pre-check or global entry and passengers who've also requested from Delta. A colleague recently tried it in Atlanta and reported it was like an extra fast version of pre-check that probably saved him a few minutes on his trip. Just remember, anytime data gets collected somewhere, it could also be stolen. You only get one face. TSA says all databases are encrypted to reduce hacking. But in 2019, the Department of Homeland Security disclosed that photos of travelers were taken in a data breach, accessing through the network of one of its subcontractors. Okay, so what you're saying is that a human being can create an encryption algorithm that is secure. No, because if a human being can create an encryption algorithm, another human being can figure out how to untangle it. I mean, did you ever watch the movie? I mean, talking about Alan Turing, how he broke the codes of the Nazi U-boat fleet. Yeah, the birth of modern computers. None of this facial recognition technology is mandated. Those who do not feel comfortable will still have to present their ID, but they can tell the officer they don't want their photo taken. The officer will turn off the live camera. There are also supposed to be signs around you informing you of your rights. Does it mean you'll get moved to a slower line, get an extra pat down or a mark on your record? You should also have no derogatory experience based on you exercising your right. If you suspect that has happened, the TSA says you should go speak to a manager. I didn't fly for a long time when they started this mess because I didn't want to be patted down. As a matter of fact, I was patted down once, and I said, if you touch my junk, I'm calling the cops. He called a supervisor over there. And the supervisor said, don't touch his junk. I said, proceed. But if you touch my junk, I'm calling the cops. He didn't. But I still felt like I had been essentially frisked, which is basically what it is, for no reason whatsoever. For no reason whatsoever. You see, in the United States, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty, unless you're going to fly. And then you're guilty. We're just making sure that you're not guilty. There's a big difference between presumed innocence and making sure you're not guilty. They start from a premise of believing that you might be guilty. That's not even mere suspicion. When it gets down to the probable cause law, if you read up any of this, you'll find mere suspicion. You don't get to act on mere suspicion. This doesn't even rise to that level. What, you just have like little hairs on the back of your neck that stand up when you see somebody that makes you wonder? And so what do? You run his face through the Department of Homeland Security database? Is that what you do? So in other words, this person is being interrogated against his will, by the way, violating the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, because you're also supposed to be secure in your persons. Your face is your person. See, what they're doing here is they're putting us in a situation where they really don't have to worry about anything. They know who you are. They know where you are. They have these little police robots. And people say, we don't want those robots to have deadly force. Okay. So what they do is they put non-deadly force items on the robot, like a taser or something. And some guy in an air-conditioned office, hundreds of miles away perhaps, chases you down with one of these robots and zaps you. Well, John, don't do anything wrong. You don't have to worry about it. Are you sure? Are you sure? Have you seen the Steven Spielberg film Minority Report? Do you want to live in that world? Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Yeah. By the way, somebody just asked, there's someplace out in the middle of nowhere that keeps all that stuff down. Yeah, the Imitation Game. Right. Yeah, there's a place somewhere out there. Yeah. It's called the Utah Data Center. It's also known as the Intelligence Community Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative Data Center. Okay? That's what it's called now. Its purpose is to support the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative through its precise mission, though its precise mission is classified. Mm-hmm. Right. Critics believe the data center has the capacity to process all forms of communication, including the complete contents of private emails, cell phone calls, internet searches, as well as all types of personal data trails, parking receipts, travel itineraries, bookstore purchases, and other digital pocket litter. That's the stuff you carry around in your pocket. In response to claims the data center would be used to illegally monitor email of U.S. citizens in April of 2013, an NSA spokesperson said, quote, many unfounded allegations have been made about the planned activities of the Utah data center. One of the biggest misconceptions about NSA is that we are unlawfully listening in on or reading the emails of U.S. citizens. This is simply not the case. That is simply a lie. It's a lie. In April of 2009, officials at the United States Department of Justice acknowledged that the NSA had engaged in large-scale overcollection of domestic communications in excess of the United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court's authority, but claimed the acts were unintentional and had since been rectified. In 2012, the New York Times published short documentaries by independent filmmakers titled The Program, based on interviews with former NSA technical director and whistleblower William Binney. The project had been designed for foreign intelligence signals, SIGINT collections, but Binney alleged that after the September 11th terror attacks, controls that limited unintentional collection of data pertaining to U.S. citizens were removed, prompting concerns by him and others the actions were illegal and unconstitutional. Binney alleged that the Bluffdale facility, that's the place in Utah, was designed to store a broad range of domestic communications for data mining without warrants. And so, who's this William Binney guy? Whatever happened to him? Yeah, Binney was cleared of wrongdoing after being a whistleblower after 3 interviews with the FBI beginning in March of 2007, but in early July of 2007, in an unannounced early morning raid, a dozen armed agents appeared at his house, one of whom entered the bathroom and pointed his weapon at Binney, who was taking a shower. The FBI confiscated a desktop computer, disks, personal and business records. Any of this sound familiar? The NSA revoked his security clearance, forced him to close a business he ran with a former colleague at a loss of a reported $300,000 in annual income. The FBI raided the homes of 2 of his associates, as well as the House Intelligence Committee staffer Diane Rourke, the same morning. Several months later, the FBI raided the home of then still active NSA executive Thomas Andrews Drake, who also contacted DoD IG, but anonymously with confidentiality assured. Yeah, see, we're not keeping track of your emails. The Assistant Inspector General, John Crane, in charge of the whistleblower program, suspected his superiors provided confidential information to the United States Department of Justice, challenged them, and was eventually forced from his position. And subsequently himself became a public whistleblower. The punitive treatment of Binney and the other whistleblowers also led to Edward Snowden going public with his revelations rather than report through the internal whistleblower program. In 2012, Binney and his co-plaintiffs went to federal court to retrieve their confiscated items. By the way, just in case you're wondering, if you look up Federal Data Hub, right? Federal Data Hub. What you get is you get this very, very cool thing. Let me see if I got this here. Let me research this. Okay, let me just research this here for a second, because I got a different Federal Data Hub. Federal Data Hub. Oh, here we go. Check this out. The Federal Data Services Hub. Okay? It facilitates the government-backed Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act health coverage program. So in other words, if you're a part of Obamacare, you're in the Federal Data Services Hub, which is the same building, by the way, in case you're wondering. So once again, what I'm really hoping you'll understand here is that you might have a real problem. So what do we have? We have police robots being armed with deadly force. We have facial recognition going mainstream. We have unfettered surveillance. of all of us and our electronic devices, what could possibly go wrong? By the way, in case you're wondering, you know, the FBI lied to the FISA court. You know, when you're sitting there saying they wouldn't do that, John, come on. No, the FBI lied to the FISA court in order to breach the privacy of George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. Houston, we have a problem. Back with more in just a moment. Thanks for joining us, folks. It's really great to have you here. We'll be back in a second as we continue with the Wells Report. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do? We report the news here, honestly, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. In other words, we depropagandize the news as best we can. I make commentary. That's just my opinion. Just as valuable as yours, and so we debate. Last hour, we were spending a little bit of time talking about, well, a few stories that are currently in the news. Specifically, the use of police robots armed with deadly force. We talked a little bit about the TSA rolling out facial recognition at airports. We talked a little bit about the Federal Data Hub, which actually is not the Federal Data Hub. Let me see if I can give it. They've changed its name. It is the Utah Data Center, or the Intelligence Community Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative Data Center. That sucks up everything that's electronic anywhere in the United States, and so on and so on and so on. So we talked a little bit about that, and I looked over here at the chat room, and we said this, and I said this. This person said, I have to keep my faith in my police and my military and are mostly righteous. Okay, well, let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. James Comey was the director of the FBI. Is James Comey guilty of playing politics and using the resources of the FBI to spy on citizens without a truthful warrant? The answer is yes. Has he been prosecuted? The answer is no. Lois Lerner, who would turn aside conservative 501c3s from the IRS, using the resources of the IRS to make their lives very difficult to the point of not being effective. That's quelling of political speech. And then, of course, I spent a little bit of time talking about how you could put two and two and two together. And if I can think about it, I'm sure that there are other people that can think about it. And some of those people work in the United States government. And the United States government has shown us that they are not above playing politics with law enforcement. Merrick Garland, James Comey, the intelligence agencies got everything they ever wanted with the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act making it possible for CIA to use its intelligence tools and information domestically. So the CIA can talk to the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and so on and so on and so on. So everybody's data is everybody's data, whether you're an American citizen or not. And so when you go to the airport to fly someplace and they have facial recognition, they have a copy of your ID and a copy of your face. And they say, no, we don't keep copies. It's all overwritten. Wrong. That would be stupid. Why would they do that? It'd be idiotic. The objective is to instantly identify anybody that they have a video image of at any time, anywhere. A surveillance society. Well, but that's still a long way from actual practical application, John. I mean, come on. Well, then we talk about, that takes us back to the police robots that now have deadly force or soon will. We actually know that there are police robots that had deadly force here in Dallas in 2016. A guy lost his life because a police robot blew him up. I said something about it then. And I was pushed over. Yeah, that's nothing. Yeah. Uh-huh. Right. Sure. So let me tell you about somebody that you may have forgotten. Michael Mahan Hastings was an American journalist, author, contributing editor to Rolling Stone, and a reporter for BuzzFeed. He was raised in New York, Canada, and Vermont. He attended the New York University. Hastings rose to prominence in his coverage of the Iraq War for Newsweek after his fiancée, Andrea Parhamovich, was killed in an ambush. Hastings wrote his first book, I Lost My Love in Baghdad, a modern war story. He received the George Polk Award for The Runaway General, a Rolling Stone profile of General Stanley McChrystal, commander of NATO's International Security Assistance Force in the Afghanistan War. The article documented the widespread contempt for civilian government officials exhibited by the general and his staff and ultimately resulted in McChrystal's resignation. Hastings followed up with The Operators, a detailed account of his month-long stay with McChrystal in Europe and Afghanistan. Hastings became a vocal critic of the Obama administration, the Democrat Party, the surveillance state, and during the 2013 Department of Justice investigations of reporters. Referring to restrictions of freedom of the press as a war on journalism, his last story, Why Democrats Love to Spy on Americans, was published in BuzzFeed, June 7th, 2013. He died in an automobile crash on June 18th, 2013 in Los Angeles, California. Okay? Are you with me so far? All right. So on June 18th, he died in a single vehicle automobile crash in a Mercedes-Benz C250 coupe at approximately 4:25 a.m. in Hancock Park, neighborhood of Los Angeles. A witness to the crash said the car seemed to be traveling at a maximum speed and was creating sparks and fumes before it fishtailed and crashed into a palm tree. Video from a nearby security camera reportedly shows Hastings' vehicle speeding and bursting into flames. Let's see. People getting killed in a Mercedes. People getting killed in a Mercedes. That rings a bell. Oh, yeah. Lady Diana Spencer. No, I'm not connecting these two things, and I'm not trying to create a conspiracy theory or anything like that, but the reason I'm bringing that up is she was in a Mercedes-Benz that was driving erratically at high speed and hit a column in an underground causeway. She died of internal injuries from that crash. What was missing? A fire. No fire. Interesting. Let's see. 2 days after the crash, the Los Angeles Police Department declared there was no sign of foul play. The coroner's report ruled the death to be an accident. An autopsy showed the cause of death was massive blunt force trauma consistent with a high-speed crash. So remember when I was talking earlier today about cars that argue with you when you're driving? By the way, after this crash, a lot of people started wondering, gosh, is it possible to hack somebody's car? I wonder. Yeah. So anyway, just thought I'd put that out there. So all I can say is that I have to keep my faith in police and the military too. I'm a part of the Texas military, proudly so. I have faith in us. Great faith, in fact. But there's something going on. By the way, in case you're wondering, there was just this one little other detail. Michael Hastings contacted his friends and said, hey, you're not going to be able to contact me for a while. I'm going to be out of the way. In other words, I'm going to be undercover for a few days. He crashed 2 days after that note. Yeah. And so the TSA wants to scan your face. And we're going to have police robots. By the way, did anybody notice whether or not the police robots were going to be actually run by someone on the scene? You know, because we've killed terrorists with drones firing Hellfire missiles. And the person flying the drone was half a world away. So, I'm not saying that any of this adds up, but I am putting it out there. I've never ever heard of a Mercedes-Benz blowing up and bursting into flames. It's one of the things that they work the hardest on. Even Chevrolet pickup trucks. NBC was famously scorched for faking a collision on a particular kind of pickup truck that had an exposed fuel inlet. And in order to get that thing to burst into flames, which lasted about 2 seconds, so they played it in slow motion, they had to use incendiary devices, which happened to be these Estes rocket motors. And strangely enough, they tried to hide the truck. Somebody found it. And the whole thing came tumbling out. That was a long time ago. Then there's this. After a gunman rampaged across rural Nova Scotia, Canada in 2020, killing 22 people in Canada's worst mass killing, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau banned 1,500 makes and models of military-grade assault-style weapons and pledged to buy them back from owners. Now, as the Canadian Liberal government prepares to launch the first phase of the mandatory buyback, several provinces and territories say they won't help. The most strident opponents, including the United Conservative Party government in Alberta, are suggesting the Royal Canadian Mounted Police refuse to participate. Tyler Shandro, the province's judicial minister, declared the buyback was not an objective priority or goal of the province nor the Mounties in Alberta. He said not legally obligated to provide resources for it. Marco Mendicino, Canada's public safety minister, cast Alberta's reckless position as a political stunt, but Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and New Brunswick have also balked at using scarce RMC resources for the program. New Brunswick's bottom line is this: Royal Canadian Mounted Police resources are spread as thin as it is, said Chris Austin, the province's public safety minister. We've made it clear to the government of Canada we cannot condone any of those use of those limited resources and all in their planned buyback program. Huh. Okay. And then there's this. Speaking of faith in your law enforcement, the FBI, it came out today, as reported by Fox News, an FBI agent testified to Republican attorneys general this week that the FBI held weekly meetings with big tech companies in Silicon Valley ahead of the 2020 presidential election to discuss disinformation on social media and ask about efforts to censor that information. On Tuesday of this week, lawyers from the offices of Attorney General Eric Schmidt of Missouri and Jeff Landry of Louisiana deposed FBI Supervisory Special Agent Elvis Chan as part of their lawsuit against the Biden administration. The suit accuses high-ranking government officials of working with giant social media companies, quote, under the guise of combating misinformation, unquote, to achieve greater censorship. Chan serves in the FBI San Francisco Bureau. He was questioned under oath by a court order about his alleged critical role in coordinating the social media platforms relating to censorship and suppression of free speech on their platforms. So, what happened after that? Well, stick around and I'll share that information with you. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can read. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. It has now come out that the FBI had weekly meetings with big tech, warning them on a weekly basis about disinformation that they might publish. And how could they work with these particular companies to be able to get a handle on this misinformation? There was a special agent that was deposed on this. Special Agent Elvis Chan, out of the San Francisco Bureau, was questioned. During the deposition, Chan said that he, along with FBI Foreign Influence Task Force members and senior cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency officials, had weekly meetings with major social media companies to warn against Russian disinformation attempts ahead of the 2020 election, according to a source in the Missouri Attorney General's office. Those meetings were initially quarterly, then monthly, then weekly, heading into the presidential election between former President Donald Trump and now President Biden. According to a source, Chan testified that in those multiple separate meetings, the FBI warned the social media companies there could be potentially Russian hack and dump or hack and leak operations. I have a few questions. How would anybody, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, how would any of those guys be able to check to see if that was actually disinformation? They wouldn't. They wouldn't have the resources the FBI purported to have. So there's no way for them to actually know whether the FBI is lying to them or not. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe the FBI would lie to you or about you? Yes or no? Now, once again, I have two FBI hats on my coat rack downstairs. I was a part of FBI InfoGuard. Very proud of my association with the FBI. Civilian, auxiliary, was nothing. I was very proud of it. And then all this stuff started coming out about James Comey, and I realized I had to get away. Because I couldn't rationalize those two acts. And they got worse and worse and worse. So now the FBI is talking to big tech about this so-called disinformation. Okay, who's determining that it's disinformation in the first place? Why the FBI? Is the FBI biased politically? You tell me. Suddenly, all this stuff starts coming together pretty well. Pretty tidy, doesn't it? Weekly meetings with big tech to make sure that Russian disinformation wasn't a part of the 2020 election. Well, disinformation is not against the law. Publishing disinformation is not against the law. Reference the story about the Chevrolet pickup that NBC News got busted for. And by the way, getting back to who determines what's misinformation, we don't have a ministry of truth, do we? I mean, I could have missed it. I slept since then, but I'm still trying to figure out whether or not who's this divine arbiter of truth. Now, once again, all I'm doing is asking questions. I'm not making accusations. I'm simply pointing out what appears to be some very, very concerning circumstances that ought to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. Do you agree or disagree? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report on Flannel Shirt Friday. It's a planted fishing shirt Friday because it's too cold to wear a fishing shirt. So we're spending a little bit of time talking about federal law enforcement and law enforcement in general, and how the TSA plans on using facial recognition, police using robots with deadly force, and all manner of other things. And we now find out that the FBI had weekly meetings with big tech. So what's going on is that a bunch of attorneys general of the states, that the FBI held these weekly meetings. Apparently, they are moving forward to try to look under the hood to see just exactly how deep the rabbit hole is. So the Zuckerberg stated at the time, if the FBI, if they come to us and tell us we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously. Well, especially if it involves Hunter Biden. Remember that Mark Zuckerberg gave $400 million in grants to Democrat Party candidates in the run-up to the 2020 election. Quote, on information and belief, the FBI's reference to a dump of information was a specific reference to the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, which was already in the FBI's possession. They knew it was on the laptop. According to the complaint, pursuant to third-party subpoenas, Meta identified the FBI's Foreign Interference Task Force, and Chan is involved in the communications between the FBI and Meta that led to Facebook's suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. A Louisiana federal judge ordered Chan's deposition November 14th. Chan had the authority over cybersecurity issues for the FBI in San Francisco, California region, which includes the headquarters of major social media platforms, and played a critical role for the FBI in coordinating with social media platforms related to censorship. Is that some conspiracy theorist journalist saying that? No, it's Judge Terry A. Doty. The judge wrote this, even if Chan played no role in the Hunter Biden laptop communication issue, he may have knowledge of who did, and his deposition is nonetheless warranted. If Chan played no role in the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, then such information will be made clear in the deposition. Fox News learned that according to Chan's testimony, the FBI regularly sends social media companies lists of internet URLs and social media accounts that should be taken down because they are disinformation from, quote, malign foreign influence operations. You know, like the collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians. The FBI then requires whether the platforms, or inquires rather, whether the platforms have been taken down. On many occasions, the platforms taken down are the accounts flagged by the FBI. Since filing our lawsuit, we've uncovered troves of discoveries that show a massive censorship enterprise, said Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Now we're deposing top government officials. We're one of the first to get a look under the hood. The information we've uncovered through those depositions has been shocking, to say the least. It's clear from Tuesday's deposition the FBI has an extremely close role in working to censor freedom of speech. Americans should be angered that during the 2020 election cycle, federal agencies peddled information that has since been disproven, said Attorney General Jeff Landry. No American should be censored by the government. Chan and the FBI did not immediately respond to Fox News' request for comment. Remember, James Comey also said that the people of the United States should not be able to keep secrets from their government. Fourth Amendment ring a bell, Director Comey? And so what I'll do is I'll just take today's news and just leave it on the table. Do with it as you choose. But wait, there's more. Earlier this month, 3 physicians filed a lawsuit against the Department of Health and Human Services, Secretary Xavier Becerra, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and FDA Commissioner Robert Califf in a Texas court. They allege The FDA acted outside its authority and, quote, illegally interfered with a doctor's ability to practice medicine by discouraging the use of ivermectin to treat COVID-19. The physicians are Dr. Robert L. Apter, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, and Dr. Paul E. Merrick. Bowden is an ear, nose, and throat specialist in the Houston area. Mark is an internist in critical care. Merrick, rather, is an internist and critical care physician, board certified in the U.S., Britain, Canada, and South Africa. Apter is licensed to practice medicine in Arkansas and Washington. The complaint argues the FBI approved ivermectin for human use in 1996 for several diseases, but after the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the regulator published documents and social media posts saying the drug was dangerous for use with people. Ivermectin is approved by the FDA to treat intestinal strongyloiditis, and something else caused by parasitic worms. The drug is also approved for veterinary use to prevent heartworm and other parasites, but those are different products and not safe for people. Ivermectin does have anti-inflammatory properties, but it's not generally classified as an antiviral medication. It also has been approved for use as a topical treatment for head lice. Because of its anti-inflammatory properties, because it was cheap and available, some researchers and physicians around the world began using or testing it to treat COVID-19. Early studies suggested it was helpful. Others said, no, not so much, even with some suggesting it made the disease worse. The drug became a political flashpoint as former President Donald Trump recommended it, as well as malaria drug hydroxychloroquine. And other unproven approaches such as light therapy. Ivermectin gained a fervent following by Trump supporters. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, who tweeted in December of 2020, ivermectin, monoclonal antibodies, and other treatments are saving lives. In the spring of 2021, the FDA launched an ongoing webpage titled Why You Should Not Use Ivermectin to Treat or Prevent COVID-19. There were 4 primary points. 1, it's not approved for COVID-19 in humans, not an antiviral drug. 2, taking large doses is dangerous, can cause serious health issues. 3rd, if you have a drug via prescription for an FDA-approved use, get it from a legitimate source and take as prescribed. And 4, don't use drugs intended for animals. In March of 2021, the World Health Organization reported that evidence of ivermectin's use against COVID-19 was inconclusive and recommended it only be used to treat the disease within clinical trials. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine concluded the efficacy of ivermectin is preventing hospitalization or extended observation in an emergency setting among outpatients with acutely symptomatic coronavirus disease. The authors based it on a randomized control of 3,515 patients. And then there's this. This, by the way, comes to us through the auspices of, the Epoch Times. Now, I'm still trying to verify the Epoch Times. You know, I analyze news for fact and bias. I'm still working on the Epoch Times. My drugs are wearing off. I'm still working on the Epoch Times on this one. But I read this first. So I gave you the background. Listen to this. Boyd and Gray and Associates filed a lawsuit on behalf of 3 doctors who allege the Food and Drug Administration illegally interfered with their doctor-patient relationships, resulting in harm. They also claim the FDA broke the law when their agency issued statements prohibiting the use of ivermectin to treat COVID-19. In response to the lawsuit, lawyers for the FDA claimed its guidance for people to stop taking ivermectin for COVID-19 was informal and just a recommendation. As such, they weren't mandating against it. However, in an interview that aired on NTD's Newsmakers November 23rd, Dr. Scott Atlas, senior fellow in healthcare policy at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, confirmed the FDA did indeed take an unprecedented approach against ivermectin and said that their defense amounts to the FBI trying to rewrite COVID-19 history. This is unprecedented, and frankly, in my 30 years as a doctor, whether the use of an FDA-approved drug was somehow forbidden if you used it for off-label. In the United States, that's the standard of care. The standard of care, Atlas explained, is that once the FDA approves the drugs, doctors are allowed to use the drug to treat other conditions. Atlas said that ivermectin was approved by the FDA and found to be so safe that billions of doses have been given. He said that ivermectin is available over the counter in many countries without a doctor's prescription. This was a really shocking interference of the ability of a doctor to do its job. When asked by the FDA was attempting to rewrite history by stating its guidance against ivermectin was a recommendation only. Atlas said the rewrite on ivermectin is just the beginning. Quote, "What we're seeing is a complete Orwellian rewrite of all things during this pandemic," said Dr. Atlas. The quote continues, "Many colleagues of mine were always saying the truth will prevail. And once the truth comes out, some of these drugs were either useful or safe. There's an awful lot of cover your behind," unquote. Atlas then alleged that the FDA didn't just forbid ivermectin. Instead, its language was such that pharmacists and pharmacies refused to fill prescriptions from doctors. Such a stance was really unprecedented. Well, actually not, doctor. It actually wasn't. Because there were a whole bunch of pharmacists that got in trouble. Some lost their licenses for not filling Plan B prescriptions. Remember that? Suddenly it's okay. He pointed out that Dr. Deborah Birx, former White House COVID-19 response coordinator, claimed she opposed the lockdowns. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, claims he opposed school closings. Back to ivermectin, Atlas said the FDA's prohibiting of its off-use label to treat COVID-19 was one of the bigger failures of the National Institutes of Health. The NIH could have done definitive clinical trials in the spring of 2020. Instead, they blocked those trials. They made people afraid of the drugs so that even trials were attempted, patients were not willing to enter those trials. Atlas then stated unequivocally the position taken by the NIH and FDA was an unethical abuse of public health. Plaintiffs in the case against the FDA include Dr. Robert Apter, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, and Dr. Paul Merrick. The lawyers also noted the court doesn't rule against, if the court doesn't rule against the FDA violating its statutory lane and unlawful actions, the FDA will continue to interfere with the practice of medicine. Dr. Atlas agreed. Depending on the outcome of these, there will be either a real chilling of what doctors can say and do for their patients, complete interference in a doctor's ability to help a patient, or the lawsuits will go the other way. We'll hopefully see a restoration of the freedom of medical practice. Atlas said the doctors are afraid to be honest with their patients because of what the NIH and the FDA have done over the past few years. The cited statements were not directives. They were not mandatory. They were recommendations, said Isaac Belfer, one of the lawyers for the FDA, during a November 1st hearing into the federal court in Texas. They said what parties should do. They said, for example, why should you not take ivermectin to treat COVID-19? They didn't say you may not do it, you must not do it. They did not say it's prohibited or unlawful. They also did not say that doctors may not prescribe ivermectin. But then that takes us down to the pharmacists, who, based on the same direction from both of those agencies, wouldn't fill the prescriptions. As further evidence, the FDA did not prohibit ivermectin's use. Belfer said these plaintiffs, by their own admission, have continued to prescribe ivermectin. So they've always had the authority. It may be their patients were not able to fill the prescriptions, but the doctors themselves always had the authority. That's what we call political slime. By the way, the CDC, it was either hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin was actually approved for use of treating COVID-19 in the literature of the CDC website. I read it. See, I can read. And I reported it on this broadcast. So once again, why was ivermectin sent off to uncertain and definitive exile? Well, because Donald Trump said it was a good idea. So what we have here is we have a government that's operating on a political endeavor. And the parts of the government that are not supposed to be political are playing politics anyway. Law enforcement, regulatory agencies, public health entities. So all of us who were talking about how it would be absolutely disastrous for the federal government to be involved in healthcare, I got to rest my case here. I simply have to rest my case. So what has happened to our government? How did we end up here? What do you suppose happened? I hate to sound partisan, but I can't remember much of this happening before the Obama administration. I cannot remember the overt political use of American intelligence agencies against citizens of the United States. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, I could not imagine that the FBI would be even accused of anything that they're being accused of on a regular basis to this very day. So what's going on? Anybody got any clues? Sure would like to hear them. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. Yesterday, a federal appeals court removed a major obstacle to the criminal investigation into former President Donald J. Trump's hoarding of government documents. I've got to point out bias in this case. This is the New York Times. The use of the word hoarding is somewhat strange insofar as President Obama hoarded 33 million documents, but we'll just leave that be for right now. They ended an outside review of thousands of records the FBI seized from his home and freeing the Justice Department to use them in their inquiry. In a unanimous but unsigned 21-page ruling, a three-member panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in Atlanta shut down a lawsuit brought by President Trump that has, for nearly 3 months, slowed the inquiry into whether he illegally kept national security records at his Mar-a-Lago residence and obstructed the government's efforts to retrieve them. The appeals court was sharply critical of the decision in September by Judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee who sits in the Southern District of Florida, to intervene in the case. The court said Judge Cannon never had legitimate jurisdiction to order the review or bar investigators from using the files, and that there was no justification for treating Mr. Trump differently from any other target of a search warrant. Quote, it is indeed extraordinary for a warrant to be executed at the home of a former president, but not in a way that affects our legal analysis or otherwise gives the judiciary license to interfere in an ongoing investigation, according to the court. Limits on when the court can intervene with a criminal investigation apply no matter who the government is investigating. To create a special exception here would defy our nation's founding principle that our law applies to all without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank. I suspect this is going to go to the Supreme Court. And the reason that I suspect this is because the reason that the presidency is essentially immune from most American law is to essentially get away from what we've got here. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and by the way, 2 out of the 3 judges, from what I understand, 2 out of the 3 judges that were involved in all of this were Trump appointees. Keep that in mind. All right. The issue here is presidential privilege, executive privilege, and the definition thereof. Okay. Just like the immunity from most American law that's enjoyed by the President of the United States, there is an equally vaporous definition of executive privilege. What is happening here is we're trying to actually identify the limits of executive privilege and what it actually means. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is not really because of Donald Trump. The reason I'm bringing this up is that take a look at the precedent we're setting here. This is my point. Presidents in the future, if this idea that to create a special exception would defy our nation's founding principle that our law applies to all without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank, begs the question, okay, what about Hillary Clinton? What about Hunter Biden? What about James Biden? Obviously, to create a special exception here would defy the nation's founding principle that the law applies to all without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank. That's not true. It simply isn't. Now remember something. I'm not arguing on behalf of President Trump. I'm arguing on behalf of a president. So what's going to happen when Joe Biden is out of office? What's going to happen here? Sooner or later, somebody's going to ask some very serious questions about Hunter Biden's laptop and the materials contained therein, probably beginning in January. What's going to happen? Will there be a dawn raid in Rehoboth Beach for Joe Biden? Will there be an endless parade of presidential advisors? And who will those presidential advisors be? Will they be Susan Rice? Well, she doesn't actually have a position with the administration that I know of. What about Valerie Jarrett? What about President Obama? What about all of that? Is this where we're going to go with this? Is this what we're doing? So being the President of the United States is essentially putting a gigantic political target on your back and then walking back and forth in broad daylight in front of a firing squad. The founding fathers of this nation realized that was going to be a problem. And they took steps to make sure it didn't happen. All that's being swept aside for the sake of politics. And we've already noticed that as far as the FBI is concerned, the DOJ, the law doesn't actually dictate their enforcement of law. Politics does. So I suspect this will go to the Supreme Court, and I suspect the Supreme Court will find some sort of limit to what the legislative branch can do to interfere with the president. And then we'll have some definition of executive privilege. Thanks for watching today. I'll see you again on Monday. All right. You don't have any idea whether Obama went through the process, Isaac. You have no idea. Neither do you. Neither do you. Comparing Obama and Trump is not very sound. Why? They're both presidents. And by the way, you were pointing out about Barbara Starr. Who were those Associated Press reporters? There were 33 of them that were investigated and wiretapped by President Obama. So you were okay with that, right? He went through the NRA. Yeah. What if he has materials that didn't go through the NRA? I said Trump never spied. I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. I just pointed out that the FBI lied to the FISA court and got away with it 3 times. No, I didn't. I didn't say that Trump never spied on anybody. I wouldn't say that because I don't have that information. I had to look up Barbara Starr right here. I've got it right here. Let's see, Barbara Starr, CNN's Barbara Starr, targeted by the Trump administration in secret seizure of emails. The Trump administration, stand by. Trump administration secretly sought and acquired the 2017 phone and email records of CNN reporter Barbara Starr. On May 13th, the Justice Department informed Starr, a Pentagon correspondent, the prosecutors had obtained her phone and email records from June 1st, 2017 to July 31st, 2017. I thought you said that President Trump did this. This is the Department of Justice. The letter listed phone numbers for Starr's Pentagon extension, the CNN Pentagon booth phone, and her home and cell phones, as well as Starr's work and personal email accounts. CNN strongly condemns the secret collection of any aspect of a journalist's correspondence, which is clearly protected by the First Amendment, said Jeff Zucker. We're asking for an immediate meeting with the Justice Department for an explanation. It's unclear when the investigation was opened and which attorney general it occurred under, Jeff Sessions or William Barr. What exactly the Trump administration was looking for in Starr's correspondence is also a mystery, although her reporting did include stories on Syria and Afghanistan and coverage of U.S. military options in North Korea that were being offered to President Trump. Okay? Improper? Yeah. But once again, we're still sitting here going, let's get to Obama and the AP reporters. Hang on. AP reporters. Let's see. Why did the Obama administration spy on the Associated Press? Let's see. The Associated Press revealed the Department of Justice had secretly spied on AP reporters, obtaining 2 months' worth of telephone records in what was most likely an attempt to crack down on internal leaks. Yeah, but then again, we also know that that the Obama administration also worked to flim-flam the FISA court to be able to spy on Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. That's also on the record. It's Friday. SCOTUS will rule against the special master. By the way, I actually, what I said is that Judge Cannon was the first person to differentiate between what is typical for the average human being and a former president. She was the first federal judge to do that, and I said so on this radio broadcast. All right, whatever, Isaac. Okay, whatever. Okay? So what? I just read to you that Trump spied on Barbara Starr. Okay? I did. But it was actually the Justice Department. And you still haven't addressed President Obama doing it with 33 AP reporters. And you still haven't addressed President Obama doing it with Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, even after it's been proven that the FBI perjured itself in front of the FISA court. Okay? There you go. So if you're okay with all of this, be okay with all of it. If you're not okay with somebody from the other political side, then say I'm just a partisan, and if our side does it, it's righteous, and if their side does it, it's a crime. But at least be honest. The FBI did, and Trump communicated with the Russians. How come a guy that was especially assigned and impaneled with a whole bunch of Democrat lawyers couldn't find that Trump communicated with Russians? What, do you have a source I don't have? Well, Isaac, I do this every day. If Donald Trump had colluded with the Russians to flim-flam the 2016 elections, I would have reported it. The August 2020 Senate report. The August 2020 Senate report. The August 2020 Senate report. There was no Russian collusion. Isaac, you know, it's okay for you to be a political sociopath. I don't care. You know, I like you. I appreciate it, etc. All that stuff, you know. But your story's full of holes. And frankly, it's tiresome. All right? That's all I can say. And if you're okay with presidential spying, then be okay with every president spying. And if you're okay with all this other stuff, then be okay with it. If you're anti all this stuff, then be anti with all of it. In other words, be consistent. And if you can't be consistent, be quiet. But your partisan politics contributes to the division in this nation, you and people like you. I'm sitting here trying to report the facts. And all you're doing is trying to catch me in shit. And it's baloney. It's absolute baloney. It's like, man, you know, you need to be consistent. You said Trump didn't spy. Do you know how many words I say every day? You're never going to get some of these horses led to water. Quit working so hard. Go rest. Have a good weekend. Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. I'm going to go. But all I can say is, you know, be as partisan as you want to, man. You know, it's just as easy for me to ignore you as it is to do anything else. If you want to try that for a while, I'll be more than happy to do it. Okay. You know, I will. But this is not, you know, this is not an object for you to swat around. Okay. I'm busting my ass on this broadcast. I'm working as hard as I possibly can to bring the American people truth. What you're doing is busting your ass as hard as you possibly can to bring Democrat talking points. Totally oblivious of the reality around you. It makes you a political sociopath. And that's a shame. Because you're a teacher. I mean, it's like, seriously? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay. All I can tell you is, Isaac, you know, it's like I'm reading the news. Seriously, man, that's what I'm doing. All right, I gotta go. You take good care. See you Monday.